Come closer to the fire for a little while and let the world outside grow quiet. Pull the blanket a touch higher, settle your shoulders into the cushion, and let your breath find its slow, easy rhythm. Tonight we are going to travel a long way north, to a place where the winter is older than memory, and the stars hang low enough to touch. We are going to the edge of the world, to a small wooden town at the top of the map in a year long since folded into history. The year is 1925. The place is Nome, Alaska. And the night, when our story begins, is very, very still. Picture, if you will, a town no larger than a whisper on the great white shoulder of Alaska. It rests on the coast of the Bering Sea, where North America leans toward Russia across a narrow gray water that, in winter, simply disappears beneath the ice. There are no roads in or out, no trains, no lights of other towns blinking on the horizon. There is only the snow, and the sea that has become snow, and the sky that has become snow, and somewhere in the middle of all that softness, 2,000 souls keeping warm. The town itself is made of wood, mostly. Boardwalks of plank and pine run along the main street, raised a little above the drifts so that boots may pass without sinking. The buildings lean shoulder to shoulder for company. A general store with frost flowers on the glass, a barber pole half buried in snow, a hotel with smoke curling up from its tin chimney in a slow, patient ribbon. A church bell, silent now, waits in its little white tower. A schoolhouse sleeps under a cap of fresh powder. And here and there, set back from the street, the small homes of the townsfolk glow gently from within, their windows squares of warm amber against the long blue dusk. For this is the polar night, and the sun has gone away on a long visit. It will return in its own time, as it always does, but for now the world makes do with a softer light, a long, lingering twilight at midday, and then the deep velvet dark of the rest of the hours. Lamplight does the work the sun has set down. Kerosene lamps in kitchens, oil lamps on shopkeepers' counters, a single lantern swinging from a porch hook, throwing a little gold circle on the snow below. Listen for a moment. The town is hushed, but not empty. From one house comes the soft clink of a kettle settling on a stove. From another, the murmur of a mother reading to a child whose eyelids are growing heavy. A man in a thick wool coat crosses the street, his boots making that lovely dry whisper that snow makes when the temperature has dropped well below zero. Somewhere down by the harbor, a husky lifts its head, considers the night, and lays it down again with a sigh. Even the dogs are drowsy at this hour. Down at the harbor, the sea has fallen asleep too. All summer, it carried ships in and out, cargo steamers from Seattle, fishing boats, the occasional gleaming mail packet bringing letters from far away. But by October, the ice begins to gather, and by November, it locks the bay tight as a treasure chest. By Christmas, no ship can reach Nome at all. The harbor is a smooth white plain now, the wharves frozen into it like driftwood in glass. The town is, for the long months until spring, entirely on its own. The people of Nome are used to this. They have learned the trick of winter, the way one learns a long, slow song. They cut firewood in the autumn and stack it in tidy walls beside their doors. They put up jars of berries and salmon and dried reindeer meat in the pantry. They read books they have read before and write letters they will mail in May. They visit their neighbors, and they let their neighbors visit them, and they brew strong coffee in the mornings and tell the children stories at night. The cold is a companion, not an enemy. It has its own kind of beauty, if you have the patience to see it. And in a small wooden building near the center of town, a lamp is still burning at this late hour. It belongs to a doctor, a thoughtful, soft-spoken man named Curtis Welch, who has tended to this town for many winters. He sits at his desk with a cup of tea cooling beside him, and he is turning something over in his mind, the way one turns a stone in the palm to study every side. A worry has come into his thoughts this evening. A small worry just now. But it is the kind of worry that, once noticed, will not let a doctor sleep. Outside his window, the snow falls slowly, slowly, slowly. And the town, unknowing, breathes its quiet, sleeping breath. By morning, the snow has settled into the corners of the windowsills like flour sifted onto a table, and Dr. Curtis Welch is already awake, already buttoning his wool coat over a shirt that has not quite forgotten the warmth of sleep. He walks the short, hushed path to the Maynard Columbus Hospital with his breath drifting before him in pale, patient clouds. The hospital is a small wooden building with a small wooden sign, and inside there are only 25 beds, and a stove that ticks softly as it warms, and a kettle that someone has thought to set upon it. He hangs his coat on a peg. He rubs his hands together. He listens. There is a sound in the room he does not like. It is not loud. It is the kind of sound a careful doctor learns to fear before he learns to name a thin metal cough in a child's chest, like a tiny bell wrapped in cloth. He moves from cot to cot the way a shepherd moves through a sleeping flock, stopping, bending, listening, his hand resting for a moment on each small forehead. The children are quiet. The children are too quiet. Their cheeks are flushed in the soft lamplight, and their eyelashes lie like dark feathers on their skin. He opens his black leather bag. He takes out a tongue depressor of pale wood, smooth from use. He asks one little boy, very gently, to open his mouth and say, "Ah," and the boy does. And Doctor Welch leans close with his small lamp held just so. And what he sees there, at the back of that small, soft throat, is something he has read about in medical books and prayed never to meet on the edge of the world. A gray membrane, a pale, leathery veil, a thing that does not belong inside a child. He stands very still. He lowers the lamp. He puts the wooden stick into the stove, where it will burn. He washes his hands in the basin, slowly, twice, and then once more. And he sits down at the small wooden desk by the window, and he allows himself, for a single long moment, to be afraid. Diphtheria. The old word. The old shadow. The strangling angel, the grandmothers used to call it in the villages of long ago. A sickness that crept into the throats of the very young and quietly closed the door. He had hoped, like every doctor of his time, that the new medicine would push it back forever, that the antitoxin in its little glass bottles drawn from the patient blood of horses on faraway farms, would keep the angel from any door it tried to enter. He rises. He goes to the cupboard. He turns the key in the small brass lock. He takes down the box of antitoxin, the precious, the irreplaceable, and he reads the label by the soft gray light of the window. The serum is old. The serum has expired. There is some, yes, but not enough, and what there is may no longer have the strength to do its work. He sets the box down on the desk as gently as if it were sleeping, and he stares at it for a long, slow breath. Outside, the snow falls. Outside, the town goes about its quiet morning. The chimney begins to smoke. A sled bell tinkles somewhere down the lane. A woman calls a dog inside. None of them know, yet, what their doctor knows. None of them know that a word has just been spoken, very softly, inside a small wooden hospital at the edge of the sea. He takes a sheet of pale paper. He uncaps his pen. He thinks for a moment of his wife, and of the children of his neighbors, and of the long dark winter still ahead, and then he begins to write. His hand is steady. A doctor's hand, in the hour it is needed, almost always is. The words he chooses are short, because the wire that will carry them is long. An epidemic of diphtheria is almost inevitable, he writes. I am in urgent need of 1 million units of diphtheria antitoxin. Mail is the only form of transportation. He signs his name. He folds the paper, and then he stands and pulls his coat back on, and he walks out into the soft falling snow, with the telegram tucked carefully against his heart. Behind him, the small hospital glows its small, warm glow. Ahead of him, the wire waits, humming faintly in the cold, ready to carry one tired doctor's worry across 1,000 sleeping miles of the great white north. The wire hums on through the long blue hours of the Alaskan night, carrying the doctor's worry south and east, from Nome along the coast, inland to Fairbanks, down to the offices of Anchorage and Juneau, and at last across the great curve of the world to Washington itself. It travels as a soft tapping in dark rooms, a small mechanical heartbeat that wakes one tired clerk after another, each of them lifting a pencil, each of them writing the same words in the same patient hand. Diphtheria. Nome. Antitoxin needed. The message moves the way a candle is passed from hand to hand down a long, sleeping hallway, never quite going out. By morning, in a wood-paneled office in Anchorage, a kettle is steaming on a black iron stove, and 3 men in wool sweaters are bent over a map. The map is an old one, creased along its folds and softened by many winters of handling, and it shows the territory of Alaska in pale greens and whites, with the brown thread of the Yukon River running through it like a vein. One of the men sets his coffee down. Another opens the window for a breath of the cold pine air. They begin where any sensible plan begins, with what they have. There is the harbor at Nome, but the harbor is frozen, locked in white sea ice that stretches farther than any ship has ever dared to push. There are the great steamers in Seattle, but Seattle is 2,000 miles south, and the season for them is months away. There are 2 small airplanes in Fairbanks, brave little wood and canvas biplanes with open cockpits, but the engines are water-cooled, and the thermometers outside are reading 50 below, and every pilot in the territory has the same gentle warning to give, that an open cockpit airplane in such a cold is a coffin with wings. So the men around the map are quiet for a while. The stove ticks. The kettle whistles softly and is moved to the back. And then the superintendent, who has lived in this country a long time and knows what it is willing to give, taps a finger on a thin pencil line that runs from the railhead at Nenana, in the middle of Alaska, all the way west and north to Nome on the sea. The mail trail, asterisk, he says. It is a beautiful name, iditarod, soft as snow falling on snow. It is a winter road, not a road of stone or gravel, but a road of memory, a path beaten down each year by the runners of mail sleds and the paws of working dogs, marked here and there by spruce bough tripods, by trapper cabins with frost on the eaves, by little roadhouses where a kettle is always ready and a bunk is always warm. From Nenana to Nome, the trail measures 674 miles. In an ordinary winter, the mail goes the distance in about 25 days, traveling gently, stopping often, letting the dogs rest as long as the dogs need. The men around the map look at one another. 25 days is far too long. The serum, they have been told, must reach Nome in a week, perhaps a little more, before the supply of old antitoxin in the hospital runs dry, and the children must face the sickness alone. And so a different idea begins to gather, slowly, like steam against a cold pane of glass. They will not send one team of dogs the whole long way. They will send the serum itself, wrapped in fur and quilts to keep it from freezing, and they will hand it from team to team along the trail. A relay of mushers, a relay of dogs, each one running a single careful stretch and then passing the small parcel into the next pair of waiting mittens. 20 teams, perhaps. Maybe more. The strongest mushers in the territory, each of them at home in his own piece of country, each of them knowing his own piece of trail by the shape of the hills against the stars. By lamplight in offices from Anchorage to Fairbanks to Nome, the names begin to be written down. A man at Nenana, a man at Tolovana, a man at Manly Hot Springs, a man at Ruby, a man at Galena. The list grows the way a song grows, one quiet note after another, until at last it reaches a long-faced Norwegian musher out at the village of Shaktullik, and then on to a black-bearded driver named Gunnar, and finally home to Nome itself. The lamps burn low. The kettle goes back on, and out in the dark, across all those hundreds of softly sleeping miles, the dogs do not yet know they have been called. But the train knows. Far to the east of Nome, where the rails of the Alaska Railroad reach into the dark interior, a single locomotive is moving through the night. Its headlamp cuts a soft yellow tunnel through the falling snow, and inside the warm belly of the mail car, a small package rides quietly on a wooden bench. It is not large. A traveler glancing at it might think it a tin of tea, or a christening gift wrapped for some far-off niece. It is a metal cylinder no taller than a loaf of bread, swaddled in a patchwork quilt the color of faded roses and tied round with twine. Inside the cylinder, in glass vials packed in straw, are 300,000 units of diphtheria antitoxin. Enough, the doctors hope, to hold the line. The train rocks gently. A conductor checks his pocket watch by the light of an oil lamp and lets out the long, slow breath of a man who has been awake for many hours. Outside the frosted window, spruce trees pass in dark procession, their branches heavy with snow, their tops disappearing into a sky that is somehow both starless and shining. Now and then a frozen river slides by below the trestles, silver under the moon, holding its long winter sleep. The little town of Nenana is waiting for him. It sits where the Tanana River meets the Nenana, a cluster of low wooden buildings and stovepipes breathing thin streams of wood smoke into the cold. There is a roadhouse, a store, a tiny church with a leaning cross, and a railway platform dusted in fine dry snow. On that platform tonight stand a handful of bundled figures, stamping their boots and blowing into their mittens. Their breath drifts up in pale clouds and is gone. Among them is a young man named Wild Bill Shannon. He is not very wild in truth. He is 27 years old, lean and quiet, with a frost-rimed mustache and kind, tired eyes. Behind him, in the snow beyond the platform, his dogs are curled in the harness like commas of fur and steam. There are 9 of them, 8 at the gangline, and his lead dog Blackie at the front, his eyes half closed, his ears tipped forward as if already listening for the whistle of a train he cannot yet hear. And then, from far down the line, the whistle comes. It is a long, low note, the kind of sound that seems to belong to the night itself, neither sad nor glad, simply true. The figures on the platform straighten. Lanterns are lifted. A rail worker steps to the edge of the boards. The locomotive arrives in a soft bloom of steam, its bell ringing once, twice, then settling, and a door slides open, and the conductor steps down with the small, quilt-wrapped cylinder cradled in both arms, the way one carries a sleeping child. He walks the few paces to Wild Bill Shannon, and something passes between them that has very little to do with paperwork. They do not speak much. There is a nod. There is the small flutter of a signed receipt, paper trembling in the cold. The conductor lays the cylinder gently into Shannon's gloved hands, and Shannon holds it for a moment, as if weighing it, as if listening to it. Then he turns, and the dogs lift their heads. He carries it across the platform, down the steps, through the squeak of fresh snow, and lays it carefully into the sled basket between 2 folded caribou hides. He tucks the quilt around it the way a parent tucks a blanket beneath the chin. He pulls a canvas cover over the basket and lashes it down with practiced fingers. Blackie watches over his shoulder, patient as moonlight. And out beyond the rim of the lantern light, beyond the last houses of Nenana, beyond the bend of the river, the long trail begins to wake. It is not one trail, not really. It is 20 trails, end to end, stitched together by tiny villages whose names sound like songs. Tulavana, Manly, Fish Lake, Ruby, Galena, Nulato, Kaltag, Unalakleet, Shaktulik, Golovin. In each of them, somewhere tonight, a musher dozes by a stove. A pot of beans grows cold. A pair of mukluks waits beside a door. Somewhere, a wife smooths the hair of a sleeping child and says a small prayer she did not plan to say. The teams are scattered like beads along an enormous string, 674 miles of darkness between Nenana and Nome. They do not know the package has begun its journey. They only know the way snow feels under a paw, the way the air smells when the wind turns, the way a man's voice rises just before he calls them up. On the platform, Wild Bill Shannon takes the handlebar in both hands. The dogs rise as one body. And without fanfare, without ceremony, the little quilt-wrapped cylinder that holds the lives of so many begins to move west into the night. The trail unspools ahead of them like a long, pale ribbon laid across the dark, and the runners begin their soft singing on the snow. Wild Bill Shannon leans into the wind out of Nenana with 9 dogs and a small fire of purpose burning under his parka, and behind him the lights of the railhead shrink to a single yellow seed and then to nothing at all. There is only the breath of the dogs, 4 white plumes and 5, rising and falling in time with their feet, and the creak of the sled, and the great hush of an interior so cold that even the trees seem to be holding still and listening. 50 below. The number itself is a kind of country. At 50 below, the air takes on a glassy thinness. Sound carries forever, and yet seems to come from very far away. A spruce branch shifting half a mile off sounds like a door closing in the next room. Wild Bill's eyelashes fur over with frost until he must blink them clear with a mittened knuckle. His beard becomes a small white shelf. The handlebar of the sled is wood-wrapped in caribou hide, and even through 2 pairs of gloves, his fingers know it as a long, hard, cold thing that must not be let go. So he does not let go. He runs beside the sled when he can, to keep the blood moving in his legs, and when he cannot, he stands on the runners and tucks his face into his collar and listens to the dogs, and the dogs go on. The package rides in the basket, swaddled in the quilt, the ladies of Anchorage tucked around it, and over the quilt a heavy fur robe, and over that the canvas lashing of the sled. Inside the bundle the glass vials are sleeping. They must not freeze. They must not break. Wild Bill speaks to them now and then, as if they were a child he were carrying home from a long visit. Easy now. Just a little farther. The next light is Tolovana. It comes up out of the dark the way small things do in great cold. First as a smell of wood smoke threading through the spruce, then as a single warm window, then as the squat dark shape of the roadhouse hunkered against its own breath. Edgar Callens is waiting on the porch in his sealskin parka, his team already harnessed and stamping. The 2 men say very little. There is not much to say. Wild Bill lifts the bundle from his sled and they carry it together inside, where the iron stove is glowing the color of a bank sunset, and they set the cylinder on the open oven door and wait while the coal goes out of it slowly, the way coal goes out of a stone you have brought in from the river. The roadhouse keeper pours coffee. The dogs outside lie down in their straw and tuck their noses under their tails, and the steam rises off their backs in soft pillars. Then the bundle is wrapped again, and Edgar takes it, and Edgar goes. So it travels, hand to hand, stove to stove, light to light, Manly Hot Springs in its little valley of rising vapor, where the earth itself seems to breathe warm into the freezing air. Fish Lake. Tanana, where the river is a wide, white road under the moon. K-Lands, hands by morning are frozen to the wooden handlebar, and the roadhouse keeper must pour warm water over his mittens to free him, and he laughs about it later, quietly, in the way men laugh about things that frighten them. Sam Joseph runs the next leg, and Titus Nikolai the next, and Dave Corning, and Edgar Nolner, and George Nolner, Athabascan mushers, most of them, men who learned this country from their fathers and their fathers' fathers, men who know how to read the trail in moonlight by the small differences in shadow. And the dogs, oh, the dogs. Patient malamutes with thick winter ruffs. Siberian huskies with eyes the color of pond ice. Mongrels of every kindly shape. They rest in their straw between runs, and they rise when called, and they lean into the lines and they go. They do not know what is in the basket. They know only the voice of the man behind them, and the trail under their feet, and the pleasure of running together as one long animal in the dark. Above them all night the aurora moves across the sky in slow green sheets, and the stars wheel, and the package goes west, west, and west again, sleeping inside its quilt, warmed at every stop by the small fires of small towns, carried by the long patience of the dogs and the steady kindness of the men who love them. While the relay moves westward through the long Alaskan night, another sled is being readied at the far end of the trail in the little wooden town of Nome itself. The man who stands beside it is not tall. He is barely 5.5 feet, slim as a willow switch, with pale Norwegian eyes and a quiet weathered face the color of birch bark. His name is Leonhard Seppala, and in this part of the world he is already a legend, though he carries it lightly, the way some men carry a good pocket knife. Useful, well-worn, and rarely shown. He has won the All-Alaska Sweepstakes 3 times. He has crossed Norton Sound in winds that pulled the breath from a man's lungs. He has been mushing these coasts for nearly 20 years now, and the snow knows him, and he knows the snow. Tonight, he is 48 years old, and he is going out again. In front of the sled, harnessed at the very tip of the long gangline, stands his lead dog. Togo is small for a sled dog, only 48 pounds, with a black and tan coat gone a little frosted at the muzzle, and eyes like dark river stones. He is 12 years old. 12 winters is an old age for a dog who has run thousands of miles in the cold, and the men in town know it, and Seppala knows it, and Togo perhaps knows it best of all. Yet he stands now in the traces with his shoulders square and his ears turned forward, listening, as he has listened since he was a pup, to the small movements of the man he loves. The other dogs of the team line out behind him in twos, Fritz and Sepp and Malinka and the rest, 20 Siberians altogether, their breath pluming silver in the lamplight, their tails curled high over their backs. They have been chosen for endurance, not for speed. Seppala has picked them the way a fisherman picks the right rope for the right wave. He bends down and rests his hand for a moment on Togo's head. He does not say much. He never has. The wind comes off the sea and tugs at his fur cap, and the little dog looks up at him with that calm, steady, slightly tired gaze, and there passes between them a thing older than language, older than Alaska, older even than the long memory of the wolf that Togo carries in his blood. Then Seppala stands and steps onto the runners and lifts the snow hook and speaks one quiet word. The team leans forward as if pulled by a single thread, and the sled creaks, and they are away. They go east, into the dark. This is the strangest part of the whole story, and the most quietly heroic. The other mushers on the relay each carry the package for a single leg, 20 miles, 30, 50 at the most, and then hand it on. Seppala has been told to do something different. He has been told to ride out alone into the empty country between Nome and Nulato, 300 miles away, and somewhere along that frozen waste to find a man he has never met, take a small wrapped bundle from his hands, and turn around and bring it home. He does not know where he will meet him. Telegraph lines do not reach into that country. He will simply ride east until the trail produces a sled coming the other way, and trust that it will. It is the longest leg by far. It crosses the worst country. And he is going alone. The lamps of Nome thin behind him. The last roof drops away. The wind takes hold of the runners, and the cold settles in for the long night, and the stars come out one by one over the white shoulder of the land. Togo settles into his pace, that strange, smooth, ground-covering trot he has carried for 12 winters, neither fast nor slow, just steady, just enough, mile after mile after mile. Behind him the team finds his rhythm and folds into it like water, finding the shape of a creek. Seppala stands on the runners with his knees soft and his weight low, and he does not push them, and he does not check them, only lets them go. There is a kindness in this, at the start of a hard journey. To let the dogs find their own pace. To trust them. To go quietly into the great dark country, neither hurrying nor lagging, but simply moving. The way the aurora moves overhead, the way the cold itself moves, in long, patient sweeps across the sleeping world. And eastward, mile by mile, the small black and tan dog leads them on. By the second day on the trail, Leonhard Seppala has come to a quiet crossroads in his own mind. The shore of Norton Sound lies somewhere ahead of him in the dusk, a long, white arm of the sea reaching inland between the hills, frozen now from headland to headland. A traveler with sense in his bones would skirt its edges, hugging the safer line of the coast, adding a long, looping day to the journey. A traveler with a sick town behind him, and children counting their breaths in a darkened room might choose otherwise. Seppala chooses otherwise. He turns the team off the land and out onto the ice. For a while, the change is gentle. The sled glides onto a wide, pale floor that shines faintly under the low sky, smoother than any trail, swept clean by the wind. The runners hush their song. The dogs settle into a long, easy lope, as if they have stepped out onto some endless ballroom of the north. Togo lifts his small, dark head, sniffs once at the salt in the air, and trots steadily on, his tail held in a soft curve behind him. The cold deepens. The light, what little there is, begins to bleed away at the edges, and beneath the sled, ever so faintly, the ice begins to speak. It is not a frightening sound. It is the sound a great old house makes when it settles in the night, a slow groan and a quiet pop far down in its bones. The frozen sea is breathing under them, rising and falling on a tide it cannot show. Now and then, a long crack runs away under the runners, with a soft, singing note, like a string plucked very gently in another room, traveling off into the distance until the dark swallows it. Seppala listens and is unafraid. He has crossed this ice before. He knows its moods the way a shepherd knows the moods of a familiar pasture. He talks low to his lead dog, just the small, steady words that he has been saying for years. Easy now. Easy. Good Togo. Easy on. Then the wind comes. It comes the way a curtain is drawn. First a sigh along the surface, lifting little snakes of snow, and then a long, soft, gathering rush that fills the whole bowl of the sound. The last gray light folds itself away. Sky and ice grow indistinguishable. The horizon, which had been a faint thread, is gently rubbed out. They are running now inside a great pale lantern with no walls and no floor, where every direction looks the same, and the only true thing in the world is the harness in front of them and the small black ears of the led dog at the end of the line. A whiteout. Old word. Old danger. And yet, here in the warm cabin of the storyteller's voice, it seems almost a kindness, the world reduced to one moving family of sounds. The hush of the runners, the soft bell of the dog's breath, the wind, no longer wild, simply enormous, like a long, slow river of air pouring across the roof of the sea. Up ahead, Togo lowers his head a little. He does not stop. He does not falter. Some old instinct, older than maps, older than men, lifts in him like a small flame. He swings the team gently to the left, then back, threading. Where Seppala can see nothing at all, Togo sees pressure ridges, low blue walls where slabs of ice have pushed up against each other, and the long argument of the tides. And he leads his brothers and sisters around them, as a mother leads a line of children through a quiet garden in the dusk. Now and then a sliver of dark water glimmers between the floes, a thin black ribbon under a film of fresh ice. Togo skirts it without a glance, as if he had known it was coming, as if the sound itself had whispered ahead to him. Seppala stands on the runners and lets his hands grow soft on the handlebars. There is nothing for him to steer. There is only this, to stand inside the storm, and to trust the small dark dog, and to let the team carry the little glass cylinder of medicine across the breathing floor of the sea, mile after silent mile, while the dark closes around them like a folded blanket. And somewhere far off, beyond the whiteness in the wind, the lights of a coastal village are being lit, one warm yellow window at a time, waiting for a small black dog and his quiet driver to come gliding in out of the long Alaskan night. The little roadhouse at Bluff is barely more than a wooden shoulder against the snow, its lamp a single soft coin of light in all that wide white country. Gunnar Kaasen has been waiting here for hours, his team curled in the lee of the cabin, paws tucked, breath rising in slow, steady plumes. He is a tall, soft-spoken Norwegian with kind eyes, and he has done this work long enough to know how to wait without worrying. When the runners of the incoming sled finally hush against the drift outside, he steps into the night, and the cylinder of medicine, wrapped in its quilt of fur, still warm against another driver's chest, is passed gently into his gloved hands. He tucks it close, the way one tucks a sleeping child. Then he goes to the front of his own team and kneels in the snow beside a young black dog with a white blaze and steady amber eyes. "Balto," he says quietly. Just the name, the way you might say it to wake someone gently from a dream. The dog leans his forehead against Kaasen's chest for one long breath. And then they are off, slipping out of the lamp's small circle and into the wider dark. The wind has been gathering all evening. By the time they climb the first low rise beyond the roadhouse, it has stopped being weather and become a kind of country of its own, a country made entirely of sound and motion, of snow lifted from the ground and flung sideways and never allowed to land. The trail markers, the willow stakes that other mushers have driven into the tundra to guide the way, vanish one by one into the whiteness. the stars vanish. The moon, somewhere up there behind the storm, becomes only a soft idea of light. Kaasen reaches forward and finds that he can no longer see his wheel dogs, the two strong huskies harnessed nearest the sled. They are right there, 3 feet from his hands, and they are gone. There is only the gang line disappearing into the blizzard like a thread into deep water, and the faint pull of it, and somewhere far ahead, unseen, a small black dog walking into the wind. So he does the only thing left to do. He lets go, not of the sled. He keeps his mittened hands curled around the handlebar, but of the steering, of the trying, of the human idea that he is the one in charge of the journey. He says, very softly, into the howling, "All right, Balto." And the dog, who cannot hear him over the storm, takes them anyway. Balto is young. He has never led a long run before tonight. Other men, in other roadhouses, have called him too small, too quiet, too dark to see in the snow. But out here, where seeing has stopped mattering, he has another sense entirely. He keeps his nose low, just above the buried trail, where the old scents of dog and man and wood smoke still linger like a thread of memory under the new snow. He feels the trail through his pads when his eyes can do nothing. He feels it the way a sleeping person feels the shape of a familiar bed in the dark. Behind him, the team falls into the easy rhythm of trust. The wheel dogs lean their shoulders. The swing dogs match his pace. The whole long line of them becomes one quiet animal moving through the storm, and Kaasen, on the runners, becomes simply its passenger. Once, the wind lifts so hard beneath the sled that it tips up onto one runner, balanced for a long moment on a single thin blade of wood, and Kaasen leans his weight the other way without thinking, and the sled settles back down with a small, soft sigh, and Balto never breaks stride. Once a drift across the trail rises higher than the dogs, and Balto simply turns aside and finds the way around it, the way water finds the way around a stone. Once, Kaasen feels the trail beneath him change from frozen ground to the strange, hollow boom of river ice, and his heart climbs up into his throat, and Balto carries them quietly across, paws light, ears forward, as if he has crossed this exact river in some older, kinder dream and remembers every step. And so the night goes on. The dark, the wind, the small bright cylinder against Kaasen's coat, and a young black dog walking forward into a country no one can see, carrying medicine and trust, and the sleeping town of Nome gently along the buried thread of the trail. And then, very slowly, the night begins to thin. It does not lift all at once. It only loosens, the way a held breath loosens, the way a long-held note in a lullaby softens before it ends. The wind, which has spoken in one long sentence for hours and hours, pauses to take a smaller breath. The snow, which has flown sideways through the dark like a great shaken sheet, begins instead to fall, simply fall, in slow, soft feathers that touch the dogs, shoulders, and rest there. And out beyond the runners, where there has been only blackness and the small white pool of Kaasen's own breath, the world begins to show itself again. First the nearest spruce, then a fence post, then the long pale shoulder of a snowbank, all of them stepping quietly out of the dark like patient old neighbors who have been waiting up. Balto lifts his head. He has been running with it low, gathering the trail to himself and now he raises his black face into the changing air and tastes something new. Wood smoke, the faint mineral scent of a town's chimneys, the soft, salty memory of the sea. Behind him, the team feels it too. Their tails lift just a little. Their ears swivel forward. Their tired feet find one more easy rhythm, the way feet do at the end of a long walk home, when the porch light is finally in sight. Kaasen does not speak. He cannot, quite, just yet. He only leans forward over the handlebar and lets the sled carry him, and he watches the soft gray at the edge of the world become a softer rose, and the rose become a pale, pale gold along the rim of the snow. It is 5:30 in the morning. It is February the 2nd. He has been driving sled dogs through the dark for so many hours that the hours themselves feel like one long single hour, a quiet, unbroken hour shared with a young black dog. And now, at the end of that hour, the dawn comes up over the frozen Alaskan coast in a hush and lays itself gently on the back of his lead dog like a blessing. The trail tilts. The land flattens. And there, ahead, Front Street rises out of the snow. Nome is asleep. The little wooden buildings stand shoulder to shoulder in their drifts, eaves heavy with white, windows still dark. A single lamp glows in one upper window. Smoke rises straight and thin from a stovepipe, a soft gray thread climbing into the new pink sky. There is no crowd. There is no shout. There is only the long, quiet street, and the long, quiet dawn, and a tired team of dogs walking up the middle of it, and the small steel cylinder, wrapped and wrapped and wrapped again, riding safe against a man's coat. They stop in front of the doctor's door. The runners sigh into the snow and are still. Balto stands a moment longer in his harness, head lifted, ears forward, looking down the empty street as if to be sure the trail has truly ended. Then, very gently, he sits. "Doctor!" Welch comes out into the cold, in his shirt sleeves. His face, when he sees them, does something very quiet. He kneels in the snow beside the sled, and Kaasen's stiff fingers fumble at the wrappings, and together they free the cylinder, and they carry it inside to the warm yellow light of the kitchen, and they set it on a chair beside the stove. They do not open it. They only let it stand there, frosted and pale, and they watch the frost soften, and the metal darken, and the tiny precious glass inside come slowly, gently, back to a temperature where it can be of use. Outside, the dogs have curled themselves into the snow, nose to tail, breathing slow. When Kaasen comes back out, the sky over Nome has turned the color of warm milk. Front Street is still hushed. A door opens somewhere and softly closes. He walks down the line of his team, touching each dog, calling each by name, and at the front of the line he stops, and he kneels, and he does what tired men have done with good dogs since the first long night the world ever knew. He lays his cold cheek against Balto's warm black neck. He closes his eyes, and for a long, soft moment, in the quiet snow on Front Street, with the medicine safe inside, and the children of Nome still sleeping, and the dawn rising clean and pink over the sea, a tired man simply rests his head against his led dog, and breathes, and is grateful. The story does not end on Front Street. Stories like this one do not really end at all. They only soften. the way a long winter softens into a long blue evening, and settle into the quiet places where people keep the things they love. That same year, while the snow on the Bering coast began its slow turn towards spring, a small bronze dog was being shaped in a quiet workshop far away. The sculptor worked in clay first, with patient hands, listening to the newspaper accounts and the radio voices and the letters from Alaska, until a familiar shape rose under his fingers. A sled dog, alert and steady, one paw forward, as if listening for a command that had not quite come yet. When the bronze was finally poured and cooled and polished, they placed him on a low rock in Central Park in New York City, beneath the bare branches of the winter trees. There is a small plaque at his feet. It speaks of endurance and fidelity and intelligence. It does not say his name in large letters, because he did not need them. Children climb onto his bronze back to this day. They rub his nose to a soft golden shine. They whisper into his bronze ear the small private things that children whisper to dogs, and the bronze dog listens, the way he always listened, with patient, unmoving kindness, while the city moves around him and the seasons turn above his head. And far to the east, in a small wooden house in Poland, Maine, an older dog was learning, at last, to sleep late. Togo was 12 when they finally let him retire. His muzzle had gone white as drift snow. His good eye had grown softer. His legs, which had once flown across 150 cracking miles of sea ice in a single push, now preferred the warm boards in front of the fireplace. Leonhard Seppala had brought him east to a kennel kept by a woman who loved old huskies the way some people love old books, gently, completely, with a slow turning of pages. And there Togo lived out his last good years. He dozed by the wood stove while the snow fell outside the windows. He took small, dignified walks. He greeted visitors with the calm gravity of a small black king, and when at last he laid his head down for the final time, in 1929, they say Seppala wept openly, the way only a man who has truly trusted a dog can weep. Togo's body was preserved, with great care, and you can still visit him now, in a museum case in Wazia, Alaska, small and dark and watchful, with that one ear tipped forward, as if he is listening, even now, for the soft creak of a sled and a familiar voice in the dawn. The trail itself did not vanish either. It only waited. Each year, in the first cold week of March, when the daylight is just beginning to lean back into Alaska, a long line of dog sleds gathers at a starting chute in Anchorage. Bibs are pinned. Booties are tied onto small, careful paws. And then, with a soft cheering and a soft jingling of harness, the modern iditarod sets out nearly 1,000 miles of old mail trail through the Alaska Range and along the Yukon, and across the same wind-scoured ice that Seppala once crossed in a single desperate night. The mushers who run it speak, often, of those earlier teams. They feel them, they say, on the lonely stretches. A second team running just behind, faintly, in the corner of the eye. A pale shape moving steadily out ahead in the snow. And perhaps that is the truest part of the legend. Perhaps on the very coldest nights, when the wind drops and the stars come out hard and bright over the white country, and somewhere a stove is ticking down to embers and a child is finally letting go of the day, perhaps the long line of patient dogs is still running. Togo at the front, black coat dusted silver. Balto behind him, steady and young. And all the others, all 150 of them, in their small, unbreaking line, carrying a small wooden cylinder of medicine through the dark, carrying it gently, carrying it surely, the way they were trained and the way they were loved. They are not in a hurry now. The children are saved. The town is sleeping. The dawn is already on its way. So rest now. Let your eyes close. Somewhere out in the long Alaskan night, the dogs are still running, and the small, quiet light they carry is shining on the snow, and everything, at last, is well.